Now, some breaking news from the Championship. The EFL board are considering the possibility of expanding the playoffs from 4 teams to 6, following support for a suggestion from clubs. Our football correspondent, Rob Dorset, joins me to talk about this now. And Rob, take us through the idea then and the thinking behind it, just why it's been suggested.
Yeah, look, Joe, this was first reported by The Athletic last week, but I've been looking into this issue for some time now, and I think there's 2 key developments I can bring you this lunchtime. Firstly, that this proposal is now being discussed by the EFL board as an option. And crucially, from all of the people that I've been speaking to across the division, it seems that there's widespread support for the idea of expanding the Championship playoffs amongst club bosses right across the division. Now, it was Peter Ridsdale, the chief executive of Preston, who first brought this to the table, and he discussed it with other Championship bosses earlier this month. But it's now been given some positive noises, I think, in response, and that's led to the EFL actually communicating with Championship clubs last week to say, what do you think about this idea? We're discussing it as a possibility. Now, there's been no comment from the EFL on this. It's too sensitive for them to do that right now. But the idea would be that there would be 2 eliminator matches for the teams that are involved in 5th place in the Championship down to 8th place in the Championship. So whoever finishes 3rd and 4th would still go through to the semi-finals of the playoffs as we understand it now. 2-legged playoff semi-finals followed by a one-off winner-takes-all showpiece game at Wembley to decide who goes into the Premier League. But for those teams that have finished 5th to 8th, they would have one-off matches again, whichever team finished higher in the division, to decide which of those teams would go forward to face the other 2 teams in the playoff semi-finals. So eliminator matches of those 4 teams that finished 5th to 8th to decide who plays the teams that have finished 3rd and 4th. And the idea isn't new. It was first suggested more than 20 years ago, actually. But the difference now is the mood music I'm hearing about this. The people I'm speaking to across the division and within football are making it very, very clear to me that the mood music feels different and that there is widespread approval for this idea. So all eyes on the EFL now to see what happens next.
So you've spoken about that widespread approval that you're hearing. What is the appeal to clubs about this idea?
Well, look, I think the first thing to stress, Joe, is that this won't be introduced this season. The competition has already started in the Championship, and they wouldn't change the rules mid-season. And so this is something that could be discussed for potentially at the earliest the start of next season. And crucially, it would need the support of the FA and the Premier League to go ahead. But I think there's a breadth of opinion in the second tier amongst bosses and supporters that parachute payments have distorted the level of competition in the competition, giving an unfair advantage to the clubs that have parachute payments, making it much easier for them to win promotion back to the Premier League. Now, of course, the counter argument to that is that the Premier League feels that those clubs feel they need it if they're going to be able to compete in the Premier League. They need those parachute payments as a fail-safe should they be relegated straight back down. So this idea is to try and reduce the number of dead rubbers towards the back end of the season, give more teams a chance to compete for something at the top of the division later in the season, but crucially also to try and nullify and reduce the impact of those parachute payments so that the clubs that don't have parachute payments have got an outside chance of getting into the playoffs. Maybe they finish 8th and then they still have a chance of making it to the Premier League. So I think those are the discussions and the motivations for the Championship clubs that support this idea. And as I say, the idea I've been given is that a lot of Championship clubs do support the idea.
And what about the counter argument then, Rob?
Well, there's still much to discuss on this idea, not least whether, if it does get introduced in the Championship, whether it should be introduced in Leagues 1 and 2 as well. Because, of course, this happens already in a similar format in the National League, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But I think there may be some resistance in Leagues 1 and 2 to the idea because the National League is pushing very, very hard to have 3 up, 3 down in terms of promotion and relegation with the EFL. And that's something the EFL has been resistant to for some time now. But I think if you look at what happened in the National League, this gives you an idea of why it might be a concern in the Championship. Barnet were champions last season with 102 points. York City was second with 96, Forest Green third with 83. And you go all the way down to Gateshead, who finished 8th. They had 67 points. That's 35 points fewer than Barnet, who were promoted as champions. So if that were to happen in the Championship, I think the concern for maybe the Premier League, who again, they're not talking about this either at the moment, the concern for them might be that it would dilute the quality of teams going into England's top division. And we know how difficult it is to survive in the Premier League right now. Look at the last 2 seasons where the 3 promoted teams have been relegated straight back down at the first attempt. So I think that will be a real concern. And if the EFL decide to go with this idea, they have got to get it past the Premier League and the FA. But there is a proposal now, and it's being discussed by the EFL board, and it may at some stage be put back to the Championship clubs for a vote, and potentially they could be put forward as a plan to the FA and the Premier League. And the sense I'm getting is there's much more of an appetite now amongst most of the Championship clubs for this new idea to happen.